President Trump is set to shake things up at the World Economic Forum, that meeting of useless globalists in Davos, Switzerland this week. The president will be there, and he will be bringing the largest U.S. delegation ever, flooding the zone. And President Trump's expected to challenge the global order and push his America First policies. It's on the heels of fresh tariff threats over Greenland. The White House says Europe needs to trust America's leadership.
And if you go back and look that as we've negotiated these great deals, both for the U.S. and for Europe, then their economies have boomed, their stock markets have boomed. It's been amongst the better years ever for them, because basically they see that the U.S. right now is once again the shining city on the hill, that we're the engine of global growth. And President Trump has accomplished that really in just 1 year.
I do love the appearance of, it's not just President Trump, it's like, we're bringing everybody. We're bringing the biggest delegation.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, that means you can talk.
I know. Thank you for letting me talk. The one thing I want to be clear about is that I admire President Trump's intelligence around business, around money, around the world economy. I hope that we show up with that mindset to be the most intelligent in the room, but not always the most abrasive. And I think we need to maybe just temper it just a little to try to get something more accomplished and not be everybody's enemy all the time.
But we're not Europe's enemy.
Well, we are if we start levying tariffs against them all the time.
But I think that genuflecting to the world and nations that hate us was the Biden doctrine, and we saw that got us nowhere. Actually,
that's why we're all happy he's
America first to America on her ass.
That's right.
In about 6 weeks.
But that's why we're happy with what we have now. We just need to make sure that we get as much momentum as we can so we don't lose that.
You know, temperamentally, I'm kind of with you. Like in my own life, I don't like to walk into a space and shake it up a lot. I'm not that kind of person. You know, I like to be friends more than adversaries. That's also why I'm not a very good politician, and probably wouldn't be a very good world leader on the world stage, because I don't like this. You've got a status quo in Europe and globally that I think has become very disadvantageous to the United States.
I agree.
Like not just a little bit, but I think profoundly disadvantageous, because powers around the globe who don't care about niceties have been making a lot of really consequential moves over many years. And I think
to our peril.
To our peril.
Yeah.
China, Russia, Iran, others. Okay. I think President Trump, because of his business experience, is very attuned to situations where the leverage has been changed fundamentally against his favor. I think he's just very good at seeing that. It's big picture kind of stuff. And that's why I think, you know, we talked about the timing of Greenland. I think that's why he thinks the time is now, because he looks around and says, these people kind of have us surrounded, and I don't want to be surrounded. I want to play from a position of strength, and so I'm just going to move. Venezuela was not playing nice in Venezuela. He was playing global realities. He's not playing nice with Panama Canal. He's playing global realities. Not playing nice with Iran. He's playing global realities. Greenland, global realities. So I think he walks into Davos. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I don't think it's going to be nice. But I do think it's going to be mostly true. And mostly true to me is way more important than happy at this stage vis-a-vis Europe.
I agree with you.
And I'll add to that and say I think he's going to walk in there and dominate. We are coming up on his year anniversary in office, and he's going to talk about, you know, all of the things that he's accomplished in foreign policy, in the economy, in taking something that was really in bad shape under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and being able to turn that around in a real way. And he's done that. So I think he goes in there and just kind of tells people where to go. He's also not afraid to say this establishment and the way you talk here and the way you've treated this is this is all very antiquated. You come and you do the same thing year after year. It's time to shake it up a little bit, and that's what he does. We talk about women breaking glass ceilings, but in his own way, he busts up a lot of ceilings because everybody else, whether it's the Europeans or it's the Democrats or it's people who don't want to take it on because they're lazy and because it's too much of an undertaking and because they don't want to risk themselves, their reputation, re-election, et cetera.
But Besant's identification of how those other economies have flourished in collaboration, I think, is a more persuasive argument to say, listen, these other countries have allowed us to be exploited, you to be exploited. Let me show you a page out of my handbook, and let's see your economies flourish. I want the best for you as much as I want the best for me, as long as I'm first. Yeah. And I'm fine with that. But I think there's a way to actually show people how they can prosper at the same time.
Well, I think win-win is
not
good.
at our expense.
I agree with you. Win-win is an important case to make, but it sits right on top of the bigger cases, which is we can't afford to lose. Let's find win-wins, but let's be clear. If we lose, it's a permanent loss.
That's right.
Right? And so I think both have to be true here.
Two thoughts when we're talking about Hasid on the economy. Not that we care, but the IMF upgrades global GDP growth up to 3.3% from 3.1. So on that thing, no, things look good. The economy is growing. For advanced economies, higher growth. For U.S. growth, higher growth. We've talked about Atlanta Fed GDP still 5.3% for Q4, high growth. But I agree with sort of everything we've hinted at is the messaging. I think we like the message. It's just sort of how we're messaging it. Where I think, Brian, to your point, it's right that we're sort of acting like our hair is on fire. We're acting with extreme urgency because you could argue that with Greenland or with Venezuela or with Iran last summer, there is urgency. The urgency is now. How we're messaging that could be a little bit better. And I think what I am afraid of is some of the critics, and you guys have heard me talk a lot about this. I have a lot of friends on the left, and their critics are, this gives them fodder. I think instead of getting on board with what he's doing, taking out Maduro, thinking about Greenland, thinking about putting the U.S. first so that we don't have to come in later and rescue everyone else. The way that it goes about it sometimes gives them fodder, and I don't want that to happen because I don't want that to happen in the midterms because I want us to have a longer leeway to be able to get things done.
I hear you, and I hear the criticism that is made of President Trump and how he does it, but I also think that the left drinks its own sort of fake news Kool-Aid, and this brings me to some of the polls that are saying, his approval ratings are tanking. People who voted for him think he's done a horrible job on the economy. That actually isn't true.
Not true at all.
It is not true at all. Polls, it depends who you're talking to and the subset of people that you're asking. And these polls are not accurate. I think most people think that this brashness is exactly what they voted for. This, go in and break things and get it done because we were falling into last place and we need to be in first place. And at least you can tell whether it works or doesn't work. That's what he's trying to do.
Well, all of these Europeans, I will take brashness in your face and getting things done for America and, quite frankly, our allies all day long than the niceties of these globalists and these Europeans. They'll look you straight in the eye and lie to you and then stab you in the back as soon as you turn around to leave the room. And if you look at, I can never get away from our energy policy and what's gone on in the United States just in the last year, because that puts us on such an incredible footing now that we, most of the majority of the oil and energy is produced in the Western Hemisphere because of Venezuela is now within our sphere. We dominate world oil production. Oil production, 20% of global oil production is now in the U.S., and most of that increase is going toward exports. Europe needs us because they have misallocated vast amounts of money on green energy and gotten nothing except higher energy prices. So they can talk all day long about, oh, they don't like the way Trump speaks.
Yeah.
But everything that he does, you have to always look beyond the way he expresses himself and even go several steps into what his end goal is.
Yeah.
The Federal Reserve here at home is one example. The lower rates. What he actually is doing is, because 60% of our debt is short-term, rolls over less than 1 year, lower rates, he's reducing our debt to GDP.
It's a refi setup.
Right. He's reducing the debt, our debt burden, because you lower interest rates and then you keep inflation slightly elevated, you're inflating away the debt. And that's exactly what he's doing. And after he leaves office, we're gonna look at it and say, oh my, where'd the debt go? Or at least a large chunk of it. And so nobody ever talks about that. They talk about, oh, he's attacking Jay Powell, as if Jay Powell is the second coming of
Something.
Greenspan, even though he was kind of a hack
I'm conflicted by the messaging, even myself, because if we were running this like a business in peril, which is what most Americans voted to have this right-sized, part of it is you would want people to perform. You would want to do everything. You would not democratize all the ideas. You would be very brash, to Dagan's point, about how you would approach it. I think the difference for me, maybe more than anything else, is you got to celebrate the wins. What's missing is when Doge was established over a year ago, you knew that you were going to make good business decisions and you were going to rip costs out. And that ripping the costs out thing has left the room. And if you're running a business in peril, you have to find the right people, get rid of the bad actors, deal with your competition, and rip costs out at the same time. If we can get that messaging back in, then the brashness actually lands, because it feels like it's got purpose, which is, I need us to be cash flow positive, which just means I need the debt to go away, or I need the debt to go down. I need things to be right. And if you don't like my messaging, then don't work here. And I know we say it's not a company, but people voted for fiscal responsibility, and they need that other half.
You know what the kind of real quick, the difference, and I agree with you, they voted for that. But when you become president, you get in the seat and you assess what's happens, since you were last there in the case of Trump, or maybe ever. You sit there and you realize all those things, and you also realize Russia's got missiles pointed to you that can fly right over the Arctic and kill you. And when that happens, you think, well, cash flow is good and getting the right people on the bus is good, but I got to do something about the missiles now. And I just think that reality changes the way you have to behave and message and where your focus is. You don't ask for that reality, but it's what you get when you become president of the United States. And I think that's what he's got right now when it comes to Greenland.
Both things can be true, though. You can do both things at the same time.
They can, but I think the missiles weigh heavier on your mind.
Sure.
Well, he's over-asking. Art of the deal.
Yeah.
He's over-asking.
Yeah.
And he's going to get what he wants, which is a giant military base. Taylor.
Holy smokes. You know what I want? Silver and gold. Silver is up 25% this year alone, and we are only 19 days in. This has been, I hate to use this analogy, to the moon, you guys. Diamond hands. All of this has been pretty much a straight line up. Now, when we talk about gold, when we talk about silver, silver, as we know, is a key input into EVs, into some of the other components here that we're working on sort of refactoring. But it has been phenomenal, the rise of all of this. Want to know if you guys have any quick comments, if this is just a dollar debasement? Is this we like gold because we're worried about Greenland? Is this we just like commodities? Marcus, what do you think?
It's a global currency, and people, like, when they have uneasiness, they're going to get attracted to a global currency they know they can count on.
It's a mania. It's a bubble. There's no explanation for speculation.
Well, the three kings didn't think so. I mean, they were trading with gold.
And silver and myrrh.
That's right.
I think that we're a more advanced economy than that.
Maybe.
Maybe not.
Sometimes.
Gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Oh, I thought
They
it
have
was
the frankincense
silver. Okay.
in there. You
Okay.
can't forget
Silver is good,
Sorry.
too. Just throw it in
Thank
there.
you.
It's fine.